Hello there. Hopefully you can see me in the bottom right and hear me. Josh here, obviously. I thought I would take a look back at the 335 Betway Handicap Chase Grade 3 from Kempton, which I will try and take some positives from in amongst another dodgy effort from me. Close we were, but close isn't good enough when your mind's in a bit of a analytical tipping muddle, as mine clearly is. But we will be clearer at some point soon, hopefully. Ideally, from this weekend onwards would be nice. We will hit form one day. We were close here. I'm not going to look back and try and work out why I went 2 points on Black Corn to win instead of splitting him with the main danger, which should have seen from the right up, which was Mr. Malarkey. I thought I'd kind of go back. I did everything right, bar the final bit. The final bit in this game is obviously the most important, working out exactly what you're going to bet on and the staking, obviously. Black Corton's chance was obvious, as described. I don't really want to look at him. I'm going to just look back at the horses and quickly flick through the thought process on the others, and why we kind of got the shortlist we did, but with a look on Mr. Malarkey, just for some of the common themes which you try and hammer in your head, especially when they're kind of a price, in the hope that moving forward you land on more of them, which clearly hasn't happened that often this season. But this is a game of fine margins and a game generally played up here. Anyway, this was the race. Why did I like Mr. Malarkey? Well, the eagle-eyed amongst you will have remembered that I tipped him last time out when he was a non-runner at Sandown. I think they pulled him out because of the ground. You can kind of see why I liked him. He was 3 from 9, 6 places before this, 2 from 7, 4 places in handicaps. This obviously now includes this win. The bit of form which stuck in the head, I mean, I had the view that there was more to come in handicaps, and arguably out of all of these horses in this race, he had the one bit of best form over fences. As always, whenever kind of looking for form in Grade 2 and Grade 1 races, naturally, along with Black Corton, I think they were the only 2 horses in this race that had won at Grade 2 level or above. And you can see here, he won a Grade 2 at Ascot from Now McGinty. It's this run here, which I kind of noted before this season started, with the thinking that at some point he's got a handicap in him. 4th in last year's RSA. Yes, he was beaten 18 lengths. He was a bit outplaced. He stayed on. You know the rest in terms of the 3 horses in front there. Top of the game, Santini and Delta Work. And 2 of those are obviously fancied in places for the Gold Cup and should run their race in what seems another open and competitive festival race, which could be a common theme of this year. It feels more so than previous years, and especially in some of the big races, even the likes of the Triumph are hotting up, but certainly the Queen Mother is looking spectacular in and amongst plenty of other races as well. Anyway, so yes, that top of the game. And then, of course, I had that Aintree run in mind. That was on decent ground, beaten 5 lengths by Kill the Start. He had had a long season up to that point and obviously had a hard race in March on his run before. But I remember that was the first time John Joe Jr. got in the plate, and he really had him kind of well placed, and he was aggressive on him. Tried to lead, but slotted in kind of second, third. And he just bumped into one there. Kill the Start, who came into that race in decent form also, unlike coming into this one. That was off a mark of 147, an RPR of 153. He was back down to 147 for this race, with the prospect that, he's only 7. and there could be more to come. This season he hadn't really done much. Maybe he needed the run there. Well, I say that he came sixth, beating 11 lengths in the Hennessy. And while that isn't necessarily the deepest of Hennessy's, or Ladbroke as it now is this year, in the sense that it didn't have any kind of future Grade 1 winners in it necessarily, it was still pretty decent handicapping form, especially in the context of this race. This was no Ladbroke really in competitiveness, arguably. He then ran and he also lost a shoe there, I think, from memory. He then ran at Ascot, or was that Aintree? So I'm just trying to remember things, which I looked at. Anyway, he ran at Ascot the time before in deep, deep ground, and he was never really going at all. So the excuse for that run is the heavy ground. You can see there that was a valid excuse, especially when you look at his two best handicapping runs, really. Certainly since that Cheltenham run, were on better ground. We knew Kempton was drying out. It was good to soft. And, you know, he was 16 to 1 the night before. He was 14s generally in the morning when I was looking. He'd had a break. He'd had 63 days off. I mused even in the write-up that he might be aggressive with him. Given, I mean, the main error, I don't know why I thought he wouldn't be able to hold a position necessarily, given that he did exactly like the Aintree on good ground. And that's not exactly, you know, it's tight bends at Aintree in places. So, and given the ground and the pace they went there, that clearly shouldn't have been an excuse at his price, which is always important. Jonjo Jr. was back in. The other thing, of course, it was Tizzard. He was in form. You can see the form figures there. It's a Saturday. It's a big handicap chase. It's Colin Tizzard, Paul Nicholls, probably the two best UK Saturday handicap chase trainers for this top level, if we're being honest. And, you know, between them, they filled the first three places. Shock horror. So that was a bit of, well, it was a big oversight, really. We should be in better form and a better mood after Saturday, and that lost pile should be considerably less, but it's not after another lapse in judgment. So some things for me to think about there. I do want to quickly watch the race in a minute, but if I just flick through some of the others. So, I mean, yes, you can see all those particular reasons for why Mr. Malarkey was a decent bet to my eyes in terms of that Grade 1 form. There's some indication, and that Aintree run and the Ladbroke run, that at some point he was going to find a handicap chase where it would all click. And it's bloody annoying to have missed out on him on this occasion, but there we go, I have. So that was that, and obviously, like I said, trainer jockey Jonjo Jr. is just getting better and better, it seems, especially in big races. He's kind of cool under pressure, rarely seems to have them in the wrong spot, and likes to be aggressive if he can, which is always useful to know in a chase over fences. What do I want to flick through some of the others in the context of that Aintree run, a hot handicap, that RSA run and that Aintree run. Looking at the other horses in the context of that form, you know, and price, they all had something to prove. Alan King gave the impression Talk Is Cheap would badly need the run. Creve Hill, he was stepping up from Class 2, Class 3 company, been whacked £9, so there were questions there. You know, the ground was probably an excuse to run before, but he still had questions. Kildestar had form questions. Ben Paulings are still a bit in and out. There was, I can see why some may have liked him, given the return to decent ground, and he was only beaten 6 lengths, so that's interesting. But Pauling was still a bit hit and miss, but you could kind of make a case for him, as you could double shuffle given his course form, but he was 10, 63 days off, maybe a positive, but and his kind of mark had come down, but he hadn't done much recently, although this may have been the main aim. Obviously, he was aging a bit, but you could see kind of the case for him, I suppose, in some places. Romain Dissanam, Nicholls gave the impression he'd need the run. He was eye-catching. We'll touch on that in a moment. Adrian Dupont, in the context of his price, is usually held up, races free. He needs a lot to go right. He'll drop in again at some point. When it does, trying to predict when is questionable. Given his hold-up style, always needs plenty of luck. Highway 101. Again, just kind of this class 2 form, not grade 3 form. Ran really poorly the start before, hadn't yet proved his stamina. Same with Samapdagel 11, he hadn't really proved that he fully saw out this trip. To my eyes, 11, 57 days off. Just a Sting, again, that kind of class 2 kind of listed form, wasn't as good as Mr. Malarkey in my view, not as good as the Aintree run, not as good as the Ladbroke if he could repeat it. Again, 57 days off. Azertly was just out of form. Dashing Perk had stamina and a class, again stepping up from class 3 out of the handicap into a much deeper race. So it was quite easy, I suppose, to dismiss some of these, and maybe going in instinct more than doing so would be wise. Whatmore was interesting and ran well enough, but he was always going to be held up, you thought. He still had the stamina question, but he travelled well, a bit too free at times maybe. He definitely has a handicap chase in him when it all clicks. I hope he settles and they learn to ride him a bit further forward to give him a chance, but they will find races with him. So it kind of was easy, I think, to do the first pit to a point and get a short list of kind of 2 or 3, which I did. And anyway, we won't dwell on what went wrong after that. Black Corton, there was a case of why he was going to run a very good race and why this race wasn't any deeper than some of those handicaps. But Mr. Malarkey, some of that handicap fall may have been on a par, and of course he was getting £12 from Black Corton while still being open to progress. So that was clearly the error there. So that's that. Pace-wise was always going to be interesting. You knew Dashing Perk liked to get on with it. I wasn't sure if they were going to be a bit more restrained given the trip question, but I suppose, as I've said before, if you're stepping them up in trip and you think you're going to stay, ride them so that they're going to stay. At least give them a chance and you can find out. And they arguably did there. Creve Hill was going to be prominent. I thought Black Corton obviously would be prominent. That was one of the reasons for being a bit more bullish than I should have been. Stop doing the 2-point wins. Split before, and I've said that before. I know some of you will think, Josh, you sound like a broken record. You need to start learning some of these lessons, and quite right, you would be too. So yes, Double Shuffle was going to be up there, etc. And you kind of needed to be prominent. So I've been droning on for 12 minutes there, but hopefully some things you may have picked up from in terms of boxes you want horses to tick in big races like this. Then of course it's making the final decision, as I've said. If I go on to a replay of the race from Kempton, hopefully this plays all right and you can see it all right, but if I just click play, I'll keep the sound down, this and just talk through some race. So this was the start. Paul Nicholls on Luck on Sunday. I gave the impression he probably gave Bryony a bit of a bollocking after this, and you can't blame him. He said, I do not know why he was out here. Out wide. Why was he out wide? No bloody idea. I don't know what she was thinking. In fairness, he did do that at Galway, but he got to the front a bit easier. I don't know why he was wide. If we roll it on here, she's trying to get him prominent, but there's quite a few wanting to go up here. As Paul said on Luck on Sunday, you know, when you get into the first, look at the space on the inside. So we're approaching the first fence. If I just pause it here, look at the gap. Look at the, oh dear, why couldn't he, Black Corton, have jumped off here? Yes, he might not have had the pace, but he could have just slotted in front of his stablemate here. He could have just been tucking down on the rail. Could have been up alongside Mr. Malarkey. But look at the extra ground covered. And if we just press play again, John Joe's trying to get Mr. Malarkey kind of prominent. These have gone off like scolded cats in front. By the second fence, he's getting there. Black Corton's even a bit further back here. But he could have been further back. I'm sure he could have been here, holding a position. He could have been upside Mr. Malarkey, covering the same sodding ground. Now, importantly in this game, you can't get wound up about bad rides, about errors. Yes, you can feel aggrieved, but the point is always, I think it's one of those things that evens out over time, and we've all backed winners wherever we were a bit more critical and looked at some of the rides in behind. There'll be punters on other horses that will feel aggrieved because jockey has done X, Y, and Z. That's just part of the game and part of racing, but he really, Black Corton here, could have been here. the big error was mine and mine alone in not backing both of them. John Joe still he's giving the impression a bit of that early on fear in terms of him it happening a bit too quick around here. He's still kind of nudging and nurdling him into it. John Joe's clearly conscious that at this track, over this course conditions, you want to be prominent enough. And as the race develops, Black Corton, whether or not, well, he hasn't had an off day given how he's finished, but he just couldn't get anywhere near. And he's already covering more ground, really, having been on the outside. And I would like to suggest he's covered a bit more than the 2 lengths lost come the end. He's been interfered with there, obviously, although that's some way out. If I just kind of click it on, we're coming down to the first up the straight for the first time with one more lap to go. It's starting to steady down a bit as they come here. Where's the bit yet? So up the straight, it's starting to slow down a bit. Now, at this point, he's only a length off Mr. Malarkin. Maybe this is jockeyship here. John Joe is very conscious. He wants that gap. He wants to get forward. Look where Bryony is here. At this point, it slows down. She arguably could have been more aggressive and tried to get him up. Get him up. And then it's at this point, John Joe gives Mr. Malarkey a little squeeze here on the bend going out. And this is where I'm already thinking I've made an error, but it hasn't been pleasant viewing, I should say, watching Black Corton. Part of the big reason for being confident was I thought he would be here near the front. But at this point, John Joe's got him exactly where he wants. And now he starts to go his own pace. He's on against a horse here who probably needs the runner. He does, bombs out. Horse here who doesn't stay. Double shuffles, aging legs. Symmetric Gal's aging legs as well. Black Corton's back here. I don't know if that's by design, whether that's good jockeyship at the front and the jumping has eked out a few lengths. Bryony always looks very quiet. In fairness, she might be squeezing with her legs here and trying to get him closer. But at this point, and I suppose this is more praise for John Joe Jr., he's got Mr. Malarkin a perfect point. I know he's going to stay this 3 miles. At this kind of track, it might actually be his ideal trip with an aggressive ride. There's a question about that final furlong or two, possibly, although talk that he might be a Grand National horse next year or kind of one for even further. So that's interesting. Yeah, so, you know, this race is going on here. Maybe at this point I should start to focus on some of the others, which I haven't. You've got Watmore here, who's been travelling really well, but held up right out the back end, further back than Black Corton, always asking, you know, plenty to close from there. You've got Kill the Start, who's gone okay, and kind of one of his better runs of the season. He's sat in an okay position if good enough. I kind of was thinking there was some chat also on the tweet machine after this about whether, awful jump there, whether or not he's actually being aimed at, say, the Ultima. He will need the ground to dry out somewhat. Roman de Sanam has tanked through this as well. Talk of him for the Grand National, which I find a bit strange, but both Watmore and Roman de Sanam travel like horses who have got races in them at some point soon. You can see here John Joe Jr. in the perfect spot. Now Bryony's wanting to press go. He's under a big weight. He's just been asked a bit too much of, I think, for whatever reason. Maybe on a different day he would have been lined up on the inside and it may have been a ding-dong battle to the last. It's not sure that he would have beaten Mr. Malarkey, of course, because he stays on strong. Adrian Dupont was probably a bit too keen, like we said, and he's plenty to drop right. But you can see here, Watmore going all right. I think Tom O'Brien possibly dropped his whip at some point. Roman de Sanam travelled okay into it. Kill the Start here, look, held up when he was ridden more aggressively at Aintree, or not so far back. A few ponderous jumps. Maybe this track didn't soon. It all happened a bit quick, but he stays on okay. Watmore, bit of a, not dodgy head carriage would be the wrong word, but a bit up in the air maybe, but he's staying on. John Joe's flown and gone. Yeah, Tom's lost his whip there, as you can see. But that horse stayed on there as if he gets the trip. Kill the Start stayed on there. So interesting. I tick around to 19 minutes. Hopefully some thoughts there. I've done that live. I haven't. That's the first time I've watched it back, actually. But hopefully a few things of interest there. For the future, I think Roman de Sanam travelled into it okay and ran as if he needed the run, as Paul said he would. Watmore ran as if he stays that trip, certainly on a flatter track. Maybe he could be one for the Red Rum at Aintree, possibly. If, you know, you want him to have him a bit further forward. Maybe Dickie Johnson, if he gets on him again when he's recovered, will be a bit more aggressive, because this is decent form. Black Corton is a good yardstick to rate this around. Mr. Malarkey, for all those reasons said, is a good yardstick. And just watching him here, this jump at the last, look at that from John Joe. Not going to die wondering. Pinged it. Superb, and he's stayed on well enough there. Decent enough ground with a little bit of cut is clearly what he wants. You can't say he was stopping there. He may well have won anyway, even if Black Corton had been able to line up on the inside and race more handy. And yeah, I've mentioned a couple of horses of interest there, possibly moving forward with an eye on Kildare as well. He would think when it clicks again still has a handicap in him, and he might get dropped a couple of pounds for this as well. Also, so that's 20 minutes of me jabbering on. Hopefully something there for you to ponder, take away moving forwards, as I will try to do as always. But with that said, this is Josh saying, I'll pause that. Josh saying, thanks for watching. Hope you found that of some interest. And until the next time, bye for now.